And in conversion therapy, we have a bill that is completely useless. Yes, it will protect under 18-year-olds, but every over 18-year-old that goes, of which are the majority that attend conversion therapies, of course will sign a waiver because they will be told if they want to stay in their church, in their community, in their friends and family, they will have to go on to it. And they will still have to go through conversion therapy. Now, there is a good argument, I think, about including trans people in a ban on conversion therapy. That's not about saying that trans people shouldn't have psychotherapy and be able to discuss their options as they go forward, and that there is presented to them the different options to go forward and things are slowed down rather than rushed up. But conversion therapy is when you enter therapy with the idea that the therapist is trying to force you into one direction. That is wholly unethical in whatever form it is, for trans people, for gay people, for any form of therapy, actually, if the therapist is forcing you into a direction. The government's failure to ban trans conversion therapy, the government's failure to ban conversion therapy full stop for over 18-year-olds is a real missed opportunity. My partner twice suffered going through conversion therapies in his long process of coming out, comes from an evangelical Christian background, and it has caused huge amounts of pain and agony. I don't want other people to go through that pain and agony, and the loophole there that the government have given, I'm afraid, is just not worth then the rest of the bill, the paper it will be written on. And I'm deeply, deeply saddened by that. And I hope the government will come forward with something. Go on.
Grateful to the honourable gentleman. I'm interested in his view. Is he proposing that there should be an absolute ban on conversion therapy at all, even if an adult consents? I understand the problem that he's raising about societal and other group influence, so I'm genuinely interested in how he thinks you would overcome that issue of freedom of association, or indeed freedom of action for an adult.
I don't think any therapies should ever have a prescribed outcome when you are talking about psychotherapy processes. Of course, you can have friends persuading you one way or another, but that is not a therapeutic programme. That's the difference.
Very brief. There is a little phrase in the Queen's speech which says legislation will also be introduced to ban conversion therapy. Now, I expect that's absolutely clear to all of you, Lordships, but it's not at all clear to me. First of all, ban is rather an ambiguous word because it could involve criminal responsibility or some other forms of banning. And then conversion. Conversion is a word with which I've been pretty familiar all my life. And it was always regarded primarily as meaning that a person took more interest in religion at a particular stage in his life or her life than they had taken before. On the other hand, it also talks about, also used in connection with moving from one religion to another. But it's also used in connection with moving, say, changing a car from being dependent on petrol to electricity. So the word is somewhat large in scope. And then when you come to therapy, I've always understood that therapy was something about, if possible, making you better. You went along and hoped that you would get some sort of therapy that would make you better when you came out than when you went in. So I find this very difficult. However, it's not without precedent. I've tried to understand this business over some months, and I've read a very erudite legal report about it. I think it's called the Cooper Report, which indicates the nature of the problem. But I have studied that extremely carefully, and I think it's talking about a type of banning by criminal jurisdiction, by making something or other a crime. But the question is, what is it that is to be made a crime? This report, very learned, very experienced people have set out a whole lot of illustrations. And the passing from the one side to the other, from innocence to guilt, is quite difficult to make out from this great learning. And indeed, I think I read that the definition is so difficult that it should be made a bit wider than at first sight might appear, in order to catch what may not be quite a crime under this idea. Now, it strikes me that if you're starting to alter the criminal law, the last thing you want to do is to incorporate in crimes things for which nobody regards criminal responsibility as arising. And to make it wider so as to catch, just in case, we can't catch all that's in this definition, is surely a rather terrible scourge on the idea of a proper criminal situation. So that this is a mighty difficult subject, which is covered by these three small words, as it were. And in recent times, the whole scope of this problem has been brought into relief by people asking, does it apply to gender, to change of gender? Well, I don't know the answer to that question, because it's not me that's putting this forward. But it's quite a question, really. And there are other questions about it too. There was a big consultation, and I took quite a lot of time to set out what I thought about it. I don't know that we've heard yet exactly what's been decided as a result, but it's certainly a very tricky problem that these three words are supposed to expose. There are many other problems in this bill apart from that. And I would love to have time to get involved in them, because the idea of moving the responsibility from the court to somebody else is always somewhat difficult. It's rather less in scope than you might think. However, my scope is finished, so I thank your lordships for listening.
My Lords, it's a great pleasure to follow the noble and learned Lord, and it does seem to me that on conversion therapy, if ever a bill need to be published in draft form, subject to pre-legislative scrutiny, this is it. And I think it's a great pity that the government decided not to go down that route. Not least, my Lords, on the issue of gender, which the government says that they're not going to be dealing with, one of the big issues there will be the role of doctors and what will be legitimate for advice to be given to those doctors. The report by Hilary Cass into the GID service lays out some of the issues that need to be considered, particularly in relation to drugs given to young people. My Lords, this does warrant, I believe, very careful attention. And even now I would say to the Minister, surely this ought to be subject to proper pre-leg scrutiny.
My Lords, on criminalisation, the government should tread very carefully, and I'm backing here my noble and learned friend Lord Mackay, when introducing an offence banning non-physical conversion therapies intended to change sexual orientation. The government will need to be crystal clear what they mean by conversion and therapy. So when under-18s explore their sexuality with their parents, or perhaps a youth leader in a faith organisation, such people who are sincerely motivated by young people's welfare are not unintentionally criminalised. A wide spectrum of response exists between unquestioningly affirming their sexual orientation and rejecting it out of hand. Treating young people's transgender issues separately is right, but many of the same concerns are relevant to sexual orientation and should not be batted away as homophobic. Finally, my Lords,
my noble and learned friend Lord Mackay, as well as others, addressed the conversion therapy bill. The purpose of that bill, my lords, is to ban conversion therapy practices which are intended to change someone's sexual orientation. It will stop abhorrent practices which do not work and which cause extensive harm, and will protect people's personal liberty to love whom they want to love. It will it will do so by strengthening existing criminal law, by ensuring that violent conversion therapy is recognised as a potential aggravating factor upon sentencing, and introducing a criminal offence banning non-physical conversion therapies to complement existing legislation which protects people from acts which inflict physical harm. This offence will protect people under the age of 18, regardless of circumstance, and people over the age of 18 who do not consent and who are coerced or forced to undergo conversion therapy practices. We're conscious, my lords, of doing this while protecting the freedom of speech, ensuring that parents, clinicians and teachers can continue to have candid and important conversations with people seeking their support. This is, as noble lords noted, a complex area, but some 16 countries have placed some sort of nationwide ban on conversion therapy practices, including Canada, France, Germany and New Zealand. So there are examples to which noble lords will be able to turn when scrutinising this bill. And recognising the complexity of issues and the need for further careful thought, we will carry out separate work to consider the issue of transgender conversion therapy in further detail.